back.
Good. We're so
Yeah,
back.
last week you were a little bit off, but like it was fine. But you usually sound so crispy. So like if someone's used to, if you were a first time listener last week, you probably didn't notice. But if you are used to Frisian's crispy sound quality, it was a little bit off last week. But we're back, dude. If, I feel like we're a sign of the bull is almost like all these hacks are coming out and all these like what's the word? Just like well, I can't think. What's the word for like a weak link in code? Like whatever. I can't think of it. But
Vulnerability.
vulnerability.
Yeah.
Wow, I am
This is there was
off.
a supply chain vulnerability this morning. Look at me. I
Yeah,
know words.
yeah. Last week was Open Zeppelin had a vulnerability. This week or today, like literally this morning, a massive one for Ledger. Um, I saw a tweet that was like the hacker put in a command that was like minimum drain value, and Lawrence was like, if I was a hacker that found a vulnerability in the most like in one of the largest libraries, I simply wouldn't put minimum drain value in the hack. But I'm just built differently. It's so funny. What do you think about all these hacks? Like, you think it's like obviously we don't we you probably don't know, but like, is it coincidental? Do you think it's like a sign of like more eyeballs or more degeneracy on chain? Do you think it's a signal that I mean I feel like a lot of these hacks are from like a while ago, like vulnerabilities that were improperly coded a while ago, and now they're getting exploited. But I don't know what to think about all this. Still kind of fresh in the ledger one.
Yeah. I think that uh, we just still have a lot of work to do to make the on-chain experience safe and fun. Uh, you know, we've made a lot of progress from the last bull market, but not enough. And so I think you're going to continue to see, you know, security challenges that emerge, which will then be exacerbated massively as more new people come into the ecosystem. Um, yeah, I think an important concept to understand is like, as a Web3 user, is kind of like on a high level what the stack is that you're interacting with. Like when you click a button, right, on MetaMask or like on a DApp, like generally speaking, like what is the underlying technology stack that like pushes the transaction from your account to whatever is happening on chain. And because every part of that stack is like potentially vulnerable to to security attacks that could could have a negative effect on your account balance. So there's like the step one of on-chain security, which is like the OG like Bitcoin style, which is just like uh, don't tell anyone your seed phrase, but don't lose it. And that actually, in and of itself, is very difficult. And like we're still working on that, right? With things like account abstraction. But then there's the like, even if you know, you're not going to lose your account, but you're also not going to give anyone else access to it like directly. You can the supply chain of like your hardware wallet, and which is what the ledger attack was about, to like the front end and like the signing that you might do on the front of a DApp, to like whether the contract you're interacting with could be exploited, to like if it's on a chain, like the chain itself could potentially be exploited. Like all of that is still very much in play, and so I think it's going to actually take multiple more cycles for all of that to kind of harden. It's easy to forget how much better it is today than it was, 3 to 4 years ago when I joined the ecosystem 3 years ago. But it's still not good enough. And yeah, we're just, there, people talk about how there's no free lunch. I think, I think it's very true, right? Like, participating in crypto, which has sort of like a lot of upside, the only reason that it has upside is because it's really hard to and risky, right, to participate effectively, and like that's what you're getting compensated for, right? You're getting compensated for the risk you're taking by participating in crypto with additional upside, and like that's how the universe works. I guess it's just like how yeah, like the biological system of like human economies works. Yeah. So stay safe, friends.
Yeah, I mean, something we would talk about internally, more specifically to DAOs, but just the massive need for more education, more cool content. I mean, I'm thinking just like all the normal tech industries, traditional industries, and even some newer ones. Maybe not necessarily Web3, but like I've made like inroads on a lot of like the popular social platforms. I'm particularly thinking about like TikTok. And I know people hate it, but I think for me, as someone who's thinking more on like a content zoomer side, like I'm kind of waiting for, and maybe I have to do my own part. And I think I'm going to start doing that. We're going to start doing that. Is to like make inroads with like content on platforms like TikTok and YouTube, where the content itself is viral and the content itself is creating a virtuous cycle into the ecosystem, which is why I got tweeted about earlier this week. Like I was at Basel last week, which I know is like I've seen some tweets. I think they're just clickbait of like if you went to Basel, market the business to zero. It's a sign that the company is failing. Like whatever. But something I took away from like a positive from Basel from a crypto perspective is a lot of these L2s, particularly I spend a lot of time with Base. They're doing a lot of work to onboard of those creatives, those users. I know it's like the meme, but like the next billion million users. Um, and that's I feel like how we're gonna do it. We talk about it all the time, and it's kind of cliche at this point, but like anonymizing like the crypto rails, so where like you don't really know you're working on crypto rails, but you're still getting the magic of the ecosystem. And I think it's kind of a sign that we are. I'm saying so many cliches, but like we are early because uh, we're still like I thought I was late, but now I'm realizing like okay, like the next 2 or 3 cycles, the next 10 years, like most people are not gonna come in with any of the knowledge that I came in with, and I'm take myself as someone who's like relatively new to the ecosystem. Um, so I think we just need to identify like, okay, what are the most important concepts and things and tools you need to understand, and then create content and education around that. And I think one, it's just like basic pure educational content, but also like platforms that imbue that education into like the use case or the experience of using that platform. Kind of like FriendTech did it a little bit. I think a lot of the primitives that are being built on base, some of the other L2s are doing that as well. Um, I think each L2 is probably positioning themselves in different ways. I think base is on the more creative consumer side, and you have some others like Arbitrum and Optimism. Optimism's kind of in the middle, but Arbitrum's more of like the hard DeFi side. Obviously not exclusively, but you're kind of seeing like each one position themselves in different ways. And I think people building on those L2s can do a lot in thinking thoughtfully about how they're creating user experience from like an educational side. Obviously, you have like the tech, like account abstraction and other things like that. But I'm excited to see like the next year, myself included, like building out some stuff on base and some ecosystems on base and other base particularly just because I'm just like that's top of mind. But you're involved heavily in the Arbitrum DAO, which is an L2. Starting to get more involved in Optimism, and as more of the L2s start to take hold, ZK Sync, Scroll, Tyco, etc. Like I'm excited to see what happens there. And I think having these, not that hacks are good, but I think having these massive hacks, for instance, like Ledger being one of the main, like mainstream crypto brands happening now, I feel like hopefully, you never know because we're all humans and we make mistakes, but hopefully it kind of wakes people up to um, fixing this shit. And if you're building now, making sure like these vulnerabilities don't happen. Obviously, they're going to happen forever, but doing your part, whatever that be for me, not being a hardcore dev, like understanding what that is for myself and then how I interact with other people as well. So, yeah. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but
I think that I think what's going to happen this bull market is it's going to um, there's going to be like new experiences that break through, right? Like friend tech is a good example. I don't think friend tech like actually friend tech did break out of like the crypto native crowd a little bit, particularly into like the OnlyFans ecosystem, but also or just like the content creator like streaming ecosystem, but also like a few other places, and you started to see kind of new UX around that and people's expectations there, right? And so I think we're just going to see that happen like over and over and over and over and over again over the next 2 years. Is basically like new apps are going to launch, and then people, both crypto natives and non-crypto natives, are going to ape in, and like we're going to find out. We're kind of in the like the improvement of like the user experience and the safety is kind of migrating from like the land of theory to the land of practice, right? And we're going to see which UXs stick the most, which ones are able to like remain safe over time. And there's going to be a bit of like an empirical like process, right? Survival of the fittest that happens. Yeah. As we move forward. One thing we're starting to see too is kind of like DAO stuff pick back up. I think that same concept of like opening up new like meta experiences that people can kind of like come into quickly, right? And improving the UX around that will apply to DAO participation as well. Maybe that's something that you can think about, like that you'll be thinking about, Tommy, as far as like content goes, right? It's like, but how do we expose kind of like DAO participation to people who are on the fringes and want to come into the experience, but do it in a way that is, and contribute to a DAO, but do it in a way that is like safe and a good experience. One interesting example of that I actually wanted to talk about a little bit this week is this proposal in the Uniswap DAO called Delegation of Uni to Active but Underrepresented Delegates. And the TLDR on this is basically like the Uniswap DAO treasury has a lot of Uni tokens in it that don't participate in governance. And so there's sort of like this latent governance power. And the Uniswap DAO is like one of the earliest, is kind of like a DeFi summer era DAO, right? So it's kind of older at this point. And there's quite a few folks who are, I think, just like prominent in the ecosystem at the time, who people delegated to, who don't currently participate in governance or actually never really did. And so it's led to sort of like a decline in participation in the Uniswap DAO and challenges reaching quorum. And so there's like this new, initiative where the Uniswap DAO they're using tech, something called franchiser, which is a contract that allows like a bunch of tokens basically to be loaded into a contract and then delegated out to multiple delegates. And so Stable Lab, shout out dude at Stable Lab, who's an awesome DAO governance contributor, put together this proposal and kind of sourced from the community delegates who had already been active in the Uniswap DAO, but then but we're kind of underrepresented in terms of the voting power, and then push through this proposal to actually move some of this latent voting power to to these delegates via franchiser. And like this, if you think about this, right, there's kind of like an onboarding path, right? It's like Uniswap. Okay, this is a big Web3 brand, right? How do I get in? How can I participate in Uniswap, right? It's like, well, you can, trade dog with hat. I don't know if you've seen that dog with hat coin, or actually, I think that's on Solana. So yeah, I don't think you can use Uniswap to do it. But anyway, you could trade dog with hat coin, or you could, figure out how to, get involved in the actual like, open source development of the project and the ecosystem around it. And that's what the DAO is for, right? And so you kind of create this path where it's like, okay, I can see if I just start participating, right? I start voting, I start participating in governance, then there's this path like via this like franchiser or underrepresented kind of delegate contribution to gain more influence in the DAO over time, right? It's like, when I think about that, it's like DAOs are ultimately one of these key paths, right? Where it's like not everyone is a trader. I don't think it makes sense for everyone who comes into the ecosystem to just like get their start speculating, right? And DAOs are kind of this like key way to bring people in who want to get involved on a different layer, right, than pure speculation. And you kind of like, yeah, we need to create these like good UX onboarding paths for doing that, and then like market them effectively, right? So that's kind of how I think that whole idea applies to DAOs.
Yeah, I think it's twofold, right? You have that, which is, I feel like, a little bit farther down the just crypto like onboarding process, right? That's assuming people are on chain. Not assuming, but like it's for the people that are on chain, kind of like familiar with the ecosystem as a whole. I feel like DAOs are kind of the end of, not the end, but like farther down the spectrum of on chain user. And I think it's just top of mind because I was at Basel and they were doing a lot of like IRL physical activation of like bringing people who, I mean, it was a very creative, focused group of people, but it's like, okay, but I feel like for me, maybe I'm just close to that, but it's how do we bring that very vibrant, functioning art, creative marketing community that is already leaning towards like the ecosystem we know and love and we know they'll love it. It's like, oh, hey, how do we onboard them into the system? And I think DAOs are that, or community. It is the same thing. Like on-chain communities are that way. So like the base house did a lot of like really cool activations where you're having IRL events and physical meet space events, which is what I think a lot of people yearn for. Like, yeah, we all work remote and we like the flexibility of working remote and being, having our own lives. But also I think we all, like, as humans, yearn for interaction and like physical face-to-face interaction, which is why I think whenever we all go to conferences, yeah, we're tired, but we love it and we keep going back. So it's like, how do you infuse everything you just talked about, Frisian, but, kind of bring it to like a first principles perspective of like, okay, well, how do we get you from 0 to 1? And then once we're at the 1, then we start thinking, about all those different styles of like community activation and franchising people into actually feeling like their vote and participation matters in the DAO. And I think there's just a lot of room to experiment there with every style of industry, especially because the tech's like pretty much there in terms of like MetaMask and wallet support's way easier on your phone. Like a lot of people are doing a lot of different like test flight apps on iOS and Android to get people involved. So I'm excited to see like with the Denver coming up, Dev Connect in the summer, and then the rest of the year, like taking people from 0 to 1, and then having those deep, gigabrain chats about, actually, organizational structure. How do we activate the community itself? I think there's just a lot of work to be done outside of just the traditional airdrop people tokens and get them involved in the DAO. It's like, okay, how do we build out that base of users who are actually getting the airdrop? And speculation or like the financial incentive, like, okay, like the airdrop from Solana last week, that was like very easy for me to pitch people on because like, oh wow, like you spend $50 a minimum on that chain and you got $10,000 airdrop. Like that's very easy to pitch somebody, but that's not sustainable long term. So it's like, okay, well, how do we tie in the value prop of like, this is why it's important, or this is why you'll benefit from joining these communities, joining these DAOs, versus just like living in the physical meet space and not the online world. So I'm thinking a lot about that, which I think is just naturally the way, like what I'm working on with marketing and content versus what you're working on with like growing the on-chain ecosystem, providing more value, capturing more value, etc. So I'm excited to see like all of that intertwine. I think, like you said, we've had a lot of like heady gigabrain writing theory stuff in the past couple years, especially because it was a bear. And I think we're gonna start to see that start to get applied to real life, and hopefully see. I think we all agree, like if you're listening to this, DAOs are poised for like a massive breakout. But that starts with making more. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I think just to bridge to like a key topic this week. One one thing that I don't like about this points meta is, in this for people who haven't seen, right? Like projects are doing almost like a pre-airdrop campaign where they're like, you can accrue points by using our app, right? And then, wink, wink, like without saying it out loud, that will probably translate to an airdrop at some point. Is it? It doesn't, like. I think the important part about like getting the community involved in your app prior to launching some kind of DAO or decentralized governance is that you're helping people learn how to contribute, not developing some sort of like codependent behavior with users where they're like using your app expecting some sort of financial reward. I think it actually primes like the wrong behaviors, right? And the DAOs that will have the most success, or like the protocols will have the most success bringing like more people into their ecosystem that last and stick around through the cycles, are ones that focus on like, here's what the opportunity is to like get involved and actually add value, right? At least to some degree, versus like, like some kind of like, explicitly financialized, like, or I guess implicitly financialized points program. So that's something that I think about a lot, is like, how can we like, design this kind of like DAO onboarding system to encourage like the right behaviors that lead to sustainable onboarding over time.
Yeah, I agree. We got a quick episode this week. I feel like this is the one week where we could just talk for another 20 minutes, but we got a quick episode this week, so we're gonna wrap this thing up. CSU will be back with us next week. Next week we're gonna do our end of the year DAO Talk Spectacular. We'll go through the year in Dallas, year in Tally, kind of recap everything. We'll have some written content around that as the year wraps up. That will probably be our last episode of DAO Talk Season 2. Then we'll launch Season 3, which we have a lot of really cool things coming. Bringing on some help for that as well. So look forward to DAO Talk Season 3, along with maybe some live episodes or live streamed episodes, maybe at Denver or some other conferences, and then bringing on some of the DAO Talk community listeners, maybe have them on as guests on the show in the coming months. But it's been a good year. Feel like the Bears are wrapping up. Maybe this bear podcast is no longer a bear podcast. Feel like a bull podcast coming up. So make sure you're subscribed to the Tally newsletter. It's linked below. DAO Talk newsletter is there as well, which has been on a little bit of a hiatus. We'll see you next week for episode 67. This has been episode 66. Frisson, it's always an honor, my friend. Peace.
Peace.